where to look. But if you have peripheral vision, use it. So I do think that now is the golden age, the new golden age of communications. And yes, Andy.
So I love the uptick in the excitement, but in my industry, we worry about what could go wrong.
Different energy, okay.
Right, guardrails and theft of information and doctoring of information and things I probably can't think about because I'm not technical enough to know. Even creating virtual vCons that never took place.
Yeah,
How do you-
synthetics.
How do you, maybe I'm just too new to this, is it a dumb question, but are we watching the downside?
Well, there's a sister protocol to vCons called SCIT, which is Supply Chain Integrity, Transparency, and Trust. And it's not the only protocol. There's also J-Link, and there's lots of other protocols, but there are frameworks being evolved right now to manage both memory and trust. You come from the world of trust no one. And we're early in the implementation of that, yes.
So I don't know where this thought came from, but it came out of your discussion about a consumer play. I think we often think, at least I do, about inflicting AI out, but what about the opportunity to turn it back on yourself? And when a call ends, get a message saying, maybe if you'd have asked your mother this way, it would have been a more successful conversation. Or maybe if you'd have told your wife about the new car this way, she would have been more excited about it.
That's doable.
Yeah, no, I know it is. I just think it'd be a cool consumer product, kind of a you know, an advisor that would take your conversation and turn it back on you and say, you know, you were wrong on that conversation, by the way.
Well, saying
You know?
you're wrong and admitting to knowing you're wrong and admitting to it are two different things sometimes.
Sure.
Maybe, Lauren.
But
The nuance part, I mean, history of instant messaging, which is God knows what size it is in market, it happened from consumers. It was consumers using it in business that made it a business service. Businesses were not the first to adopt instant messaging. I mean, I remember distinctly when I worked on Wall Street at Cantor Fitzgerald Securities. At the time, we did voice-based brokerage, and Howard Lutnick, who's now he's in the Department of Commerce or something. He ran Cantor, right? And he mandated that Yahoo Messenger be on every trading turret, not caring at the time maybe about any regulations he may have been breaking. But on Unemployment Fridays was when the turrets lit up. His idea was that you can use this messaging to pick up on the trades when the banks couldn't get through because they were interdealer broker. They were sitting in between other banks, and that's how instant messaging ended up with Cantor, because when my boss disabled instant messaging due to privacy concerns and security, saying, why doesn't this work? And then from that day forward, that was our standard. Ultimately, Reuters picked up the deal with Microsoft, but consumers drive that. So I do think there's a lot of credence to consumer-forward applications that will drive adoption, where it's a solution. They don't know it's a vCon. They just know it works. Now you have insights that we didn't have. Any closing remarks?
Well, just one quick thing about the energy question, right? So, I mean, what do you have today? Very little, right, around protection of data. Like I don't think you have a structure of what you need in broadband industry. I mean, we have a lot of data sitting around that it's in files and directories and databases. And if you did want to question the provenance or is it real, it'd be a hard thing to do, right? So at least this gives you a framework that you can, in theory, put some certification around it, and that's a big opportunity. But no, I think it just as a parting remark is just to try to think big and then narrow it down. Like think of a big problem that maybe vCons could be addressed to, and then start narrowing your focus and say, well, where's an example of that problem that we could actually address today? We could go sell somebody on the idea of adopting vCons because we know they're really affected by this problem. And I think that's the way to think about bringing it to market.
Chris, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. I know, you need to clap. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, we can do it whatever you want to do it. Yeah. Well, I don't want to see that. No, that's it should be on. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, so maybe a proper introduction now.
First of all, Lauren, Jeff, Thomas, thank you for setting this up. Just to give you guys a little bit of background, I think we just started our vCon journey, gosh, from a technical standpoint, maybe a month ago. We'll be playing around with some stuff tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, we'll be playing around with a few things, but started looking at this. But when Jeff asked me to speak about this, I kind of decided to change the format a little bit. And then I think given the conversation to follow on from some of the questions that have been asked, I thought it would be good to set a context. So for those of you that don't know us, NetSapiens, we started back in 2002. And you brought up some terms, Jeff, soft switch, B2B UA, class 4, class 5. That's the world that we come from. So when we built our first platform and application platform, really our purpose was to, let me just get the clicker going here.
Oh,
Is that not working?
Maybe it
Maybe
doesn't
switch
see it.
places.
Maybe we should switch.
Just
It was
just
working
on
a
the
second
other side,
ago.
but it might be too far.
Maybe it's too far. So just,
There you
that's
go.
fine. I did.
Yeah, so I decided to actually, Jeff asked me to set a context. And the reason the vCon thing is very, very special moment in time, I believe, and I'll speak to some of our partners that are actually in here that have already started looking at this, is because it is very, very consistent with the purpose that we set out for the company many, many years ago with respect to driving innovation and collectively having a community of service providers, independent service providers, that we're going to go after the biggest players in the market. And so I actually peeled this out from a slide deck many, many years ago in terms of a vision statement that we had. And I think now it's imperative twofold, both from the standpoint of where we are as an industry, what has happened kind of post-COVID, what's happening with Teams, what's happening with Zoom, so on and so forth. And the fact that the number of service providers that we have in the space that are trying to address very, very specific needs. And I think that was just brought up a moment ago as well. So I just wanted to kind of point to the history and the purpose and why this is just a continuation of that. So yeah, if you thanks. So real quick, launched the platform in 2006. 2016, we had about 100 service providers plus fast forward, I mean, you've probably seen some of the, the press about the number of users that are growing. Our user base grows because of our service provider partners that are in the space, right? And so 2021, it'll be about 4 years in June, merged with Crescendo. We had to have a clear decision. If you're not growing, you're dying. Our service providers, some of which are in here, were really pushing us to continue to grow the platform, invest in the platform, and continue to create relevance in the market. So in 2021, we chose to merge with Crescendo. So if you go to the next, and so where did that leave us, right? Just to provide a context, fastest growing UCaaS platform in North America. We do a combination of different things, from UCaaS to CPaaS to CCaaS, if you will. And the reality is that it's all about integration for our service providers. So the innovation that we see today and the most successful providers that we have in our marketplace today to go after the end user are doing very, very innovative things, building things on top of the platform, extending things on top of the platform. I know we're going to see some demos later on of folks that are actually building the platform at a core. So again, as you talk about extending the platform, you have to look at ways to continue to leverage what exists in terms of the ecosystem that exists. So the other way, yeah. So again, maybe we'll just fast forward here in the interest of time. Just in general, if you look at, we're talking about conversations. So at the core, if you look at CPaaS, CCaaS, UCaaS, at the core, voice, video, messaging, texting, so on and so forth. Our platform actually does that today. Our service providers are delivering a variety of different applications with respect to whether it's hosted PBX, going to voice, video, building applications on top of that. So what does it boil down to? It boils down to a whole host of conversations, right? So from a context perspective, what are we all going to do about it? What we learned here is the need to innovate and to differentiate is pretty key. And we heard some talk about that, if you will. Maybe we'll just keep going, I think, in the interest of time, because I think we want to open this up for questions. If you go to the next one. What we're seeing in our market today, right, is all of the service providers that are using the platform are actually growing and scaling at twice the industry average. And the reason they're doing that is because they're leveraging. I mean, we provide the plumbing, and the reason they do that is because they understand the end user cases better than anybody else, right? The service providers in the market. Now, I think it's imperative that ability, that know-how, is only going to get, with the AI wave, is only going to get more difficult to solve. That's the problem that's going to get more difficult to solve.
Question.
Yes.
So you're here, so clearly you got the telegraph that vCons are happening.
Yep.
How much work was it internally to evangelize so that resources should be assigned to take this as a serious opportunity?
Well, I think if you go to if you flip through the next slide, then I'll kind of answer the question. I think
I didn't look at the slide.
yeah, a couple of different things. I think number one, I think because we have a very large ecosystem of integrations that are already leveraging the platform. I think the main thing, ease of use. I think the fact that we have customers that are already looking at vCons made it a pretty easy pitch internally.
But I don't know, I worked at some large,
Yeah.
I started a large company that became very bureaucratic.
Yep.
And sometimes when you were a small company, it's very easy to push things through because you're running it.
Mhm.
But when you have people involved at different layers, sometimes it becomes very hard, even if the customers are doing it. So did someone just say, I am the benevolent dictator, we're just going to do this?
No. I think.
Because I find being benevolent dictator works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think so. A couple of things, right? One, you got to get the CTO on board.
Yes.
Right. So anybody that's interested in learning what David's doing with the platform, and I'll speak to that a little bit. But I think part of it is, and I think this, we focus on what the customer needs and what the end user needs,
Cool.
right? But I think the other piece in this is also, you know, internal operational efficiency, right?
Sure.
Because if you look at all of the voice-based and UCaaS-based applications that are out there, the reality is we're a very, very small team, relatively speaking, even though we're a larger organization than we were before. I think you have to pick and choose. We can do anything as a tech company.
Sure.
The question, the harder question to ask is, what don't you do?
Well,
And so focus is important. And so what vCon allows us to do internally is to standardize, encapsulate, normalize. So even from a scalability standpoint for the platform itself, it makes sense to look at standards. The reality is there wasn't a standard, right? So when you Jeff, you talked about vCon, you talked about vCon as well, and you talked about IETF in the early days. SIP was a perfect example, right? We chose, when we built our core soft switching platform, we chose at the time, 20 years ago, not to go open source at the time, but to go open standards, right? Proprietary, built it internally, but standardize on something that can be extendable. I think we're on that next wave now. So the internal selling point for that was a lot easier with respect to normalization and standardization internally. If that answers your question.
It did. I mean, really, because to me, that's a wonderful sign that despite the fact that you went from 2 million to 6 million subscribers through the collective of your customers, that you're still that you're still listening.
And I think that the bigger challenge is going from 6 to the next level, because during that wave, and again, I think some of our customers can speak to this even better than I can, because part of it is they'll tell you we're not moving fast enough.
Well, sure.
Right? We're never moving fast enough. But I think the key piece here, though, is that I think that next wave now, because of the AI wave and the AI implications on unified communications as a whole, I think it's imperative that we create an even more even playing field for the integrations that exist for those applications, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So maybe we should switch so I can kind of go through this. I know the application is. So this is my little dad joke. My little dad joke here. Yeah.
Very nice. I like that.
So case in point, today, for example, out of the box, we do topic summaries, we do sentiment analysis, we do things of that nature coming out, working with vendors like DeepGrant. The reality is that we're doing, one-off, we're doing one-off integrations with these vendors on the back end, but then how do you standardize these things? How do you make them easier and available, even though they work today at a level of scale? How do you hyperscale that to the next level? And to do that, right, and even though these things exist today and they're being utilized today, how do you take it to the next level? So for the techies in here, if you kind of lean down a little bit into the platform itself, these are some of the core modules that exist in the platform. And there's some obvious places where vCons can come into play, right? Standardized recording solution. Those folks, and anybody work on the Kalia spec back in the day? David Kalia, right? So we, for example, internally, when we built our recording engine, for the same purpose of being able to scale a platform, we looked at the Kalia spec because that was the only available spec at the time to be able to standardize even an internal proprietary system. And it was based on a spec. So our recording at the time was based on a Kalia spec. What we're looking at now is to say, okay, well, does vCon look to be the right spec when it comes to recording of, at the time it was voice. Now it's voice, video, SMS, so on and so forth. If you look at some of the other modules in the platform, they're shuttling different types of media, right? So if you look at the core pieces of where, the problem space, and I think a number of you have spoken about this, is the data is fragmented across multiple platforms. The conversations don't have context necessarily, or they're siloed, right? You have compliance and documentation challenges that you have to try to hit. And everybody is doing this in a proprietary manner in some way, shape, or form. There are also compliant SIP recording. And what we found even in the SIPREC standard, for example, the SIPREC standard, vendors do it ever so slightly differently in terms of how they handle SIPREC as well. So again, a push to standardize. And so if you look at all of these things, vCon itself as an infrastructure, as a framework, allows us to standardize and to be able to deliver those things out in a more effective way. Now, of course, the question is when do we look at it? So this is the work that we're doing internally to go, okay, where does it apply? Right? Where does it apply? And then again, if you, if you look at, and I spoke to this from our perspective, right? Encapsulation, I think somebody actually used the same term here. Call it consolidation of various media types, of all of the messaging that's happening, structured metadata, as we talked about, and then unified communications records, CDRs. I mean, gosh, how many people have dealt with managing CDRs just for basic issues? Yes. And so, how do you normalize those things depending on the types of CDRs there are, right? And I'm seeing a lot of painful faces over there because it's a difficult process to go through, right? So, and then at the end of the day, for interoperability and for integration, the fact that, in simple terms, the vCon standards allows you to, think of things as a PDF, for example, allows for a level of portability and extensibility that otherwise wouldn't exist in normal communication. So that's the area that we continue to kind of look at as we go forward. Deeper vertical focus. Some of our partners are already doing this, where what it allows us to do, if I go back to, at the end of the day, our core purpose is driving end user choice and embracing the fragmentation that exists in the marketplace. Is, why does Lyft and Uber still exist? This is always an example that I use over and over again. Is sometimes it's cost, sometimes it's experience. Sometimes certain markets have it available, other markets don't. But it's basically a point A to point B thing. But more and more people are looking to, buy based on experience. So what we're all trying to do is drive that experience, and that's what's going to allow us to do in some of these financial sectors, healthcare, so on and so forth. I think there's applications that people are going to talk to about that as well.
Cool. I mean, you look at the plan. So from your perspective, what's the time frame do you think to seeing some of your members in your ecosystem deploying vCon services?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think what we're doing today is that we're actually working with the likes of Strawlid and Creo, who are building applications, on top of the interface. We have folks that have built adapters to the NetSapiens ecosystem. But what we're trying to do is drive towards a plan to actually standardize internally. So a couple of different applications that we're working on, we're going to start doing some interop tomorrow. Is the idea being is how do you drive vCon production natively within the platform, right? Because there is, if you look at the operating costs associated with storage, bandwidth utilization, things of that nature, those are actually very meaningful things that all operators will have to look at in terms of what makes this practical. Because if you're going to record every single conversation, you've got practical limitations associated with cost of storage and things of that nature. So how do we optimize those things, right? Cost of storage, cost of bandwidth. Are you going to do it in the cloud? Are you going to do it in your facility? Right. And so we're working with a handful of partners in that area. There's a question, man.
Just one thing that I didn't mention, or none of us mentioned yesterday, that may not be obvious, is vCons can be compressed.
Yes.
There's
Like
a
PKZip?
zip form of vCons, and that's pretty important because, as we discussed, they are big. And
Correct.
that may help both in the bandwidth and in the storage aspect.
Yeah, exactly. And so some of that stuff is being analyzed as we speak. Some folks can kind of adapt it, and that's the reason why we're looking at kind of the recording engine at the core first and foremost, and saying, okay, how do we make that natively vCon compatible, right? Because then the third parties that we're working with, the professional services organizations that we're working with, the conserver companies that we're working with, can basically take that data natively from the soft switching platform, right? And start doing whatever they want to do with it, right? So, and I think the other key piece, and we've talked about it from a CX perspective, is I think there's a level of deeper learning, and I think Robert's going to speak to the dashboards that they're working on, as is Thomas. There's a level of deeper learning to understand the end user that comes from the end game of this, right? On our side, we're just kind of the plumbing and the infrastructure to make sure that the right data gets delivered to those applications in the most efficient way possible, right? So, obviously some of the interesting things, pattern recognition, predictive communication analysis. I think there was a comment about a cool application for coaching, right? So we're seeing folks that are actually using that today. I think Mike's going to probably speak to that a little bit later in terms of some of the cool things that they're working on, and then performance optimization as we go forward. So, again, I think what this allows us to do is really hone in on some acute problems that we can solve over time. And I think it's imperative from the angle of creating super high value applications for end users. It's imperative that we as a community, we as a group, really drive those end user cases. And that's going to come from the service providers that know the customer, know the end user, know the verticals that they're in, know the applications that they're in. I think I'll pause there.
Well,
Do you have any questions?
Well, I'm processing this. I do. Well, first of all, congratulations on taking the dive. And
Thank you.
because I remember being at UGM and introducing vCons on your stage, and I'm grateful to everyone who listened, and some of them are here today. And I do think that we're at the new age of something, and I think it does go beyond communication. Mm-hmm. That's the hard part, because it's so easy to put things in boxes, and that we are this or that, but we're kind of amorphic. vCons give us the ability to do many things at the same time. Arguably takes away focus of one thing, but opens up so many other opportunities, because we're really creating new categories. Because the ability to remember every conversation may be horrifying to some and electrifying to others. And it's a superpower. It's a superpower. I mean, if you had total recall of every conversation you ever had in your entire life, you'd be a different person, mm-hmm. Right? If we could remember, I mean, it's one thing to have photographic memory sometimes, or selective amnesia, whatever you call it. But there are things about memory that are funny, that as we age, we remember different things for different reasons. But when we build systems that do not forget, there's going to be issues. I promise you that. Yes?
I would add a point, because we only start on vCon for less than a month. But I think the most daunting or that sounds most to me is like more of the things today you can do if you're next to our platform. I mean, if you are connected to our platform, you can do everything you can do with vCon today. But what we can't allow you to do is to do the segment when you're not associated with our platform, because vCon is portable.
vCons are portable.
That is actually, from what I can see, the only distinction that now, because right now we have a scope this big.
And you can go across the board.
Now you can be over there and still benefit from that.
Yeah, and also, as a service provider, your service providers, customers don't realize that if you happen to be dealing, if one of your customer happens to be a multinational corporation, you're dealing with their branch office in the States, they happen to be based in Portugal, they're gonna be able to take the vCons from the entire business and bring them upward and share them. And there are going to be some vCons associated with, sales and commerce. I mean, all of a sudden, the bill of lading can have a vCon attached to it as much as an attachment of a bill of lading to a vCon. And then we start to have deep proofs of transactions. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Bentonville, Arkansas, of all places. Why do you go to Bentonville? Well, it's because it's the backyard of Walmart, literally. And I had folks there from Walmart and from Tyson's, and we had some logistics and supply chain people. And they were, I would say, fascinated with vCons. Mm-hmm. Because when you're running a supply chain, you have proof of conversation, you have proof of stuff, and it's stuff you need. It's inherent in what you do. And I think that's why I'm saying that we're looking at this from a telephony perspective. And I don't have necessarily, I can't deny that I made a start advantage, but I can say I don't think like that, right? And I think that this is for me anyway, a platform that will allow people, here's the big beauty of it. If any of you have kids, 8 years old to 18, hire them for a summer job. Throw vCons at them. See how they build it, because I think those are the applications that will be meaningful, not only on the consumer side, but for the next generation where we go.
Yeah, and I think that was if you look at kind of these
Yeah, I see
very
that.
basic,
Yeah.
end users, officers, managers, call centers, I mean, the end user, that's an end-to-end problem, right?
Exactly.
Who is this end user? Who is this end user going to look like? And I think one of the things that, we were always passionate about and continue to be passionate about is let the market decide. Let the market decide and drive, even if you have contextual service providers that go after a base, you might find that there's 10,000 users that use something a specific way, and that's a business by itself.
That's a great niche too.
And it's a great niche, and whatever that might be, right? And to your point, that's what we see today, and we see that level of growth. But to actually make it sustainable and make it even more valuable, providers need to be fragmenting even more,
Right.
but they need the tools to embrace that fragmentation.
Right. That's gonna be a good lead into my talk. So.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. This
You're
was
welcome.
awesome. Give it up. Thank you. And all these slides will be available. Lauren's collecting everyone's presentations, so we will have them available after the conference.
Can I make a comment quick before you segue?
Sure.
So, there's been talk about how what vCons are is a new standard for storage and utilization of conversation. And I think back to the early days of voice commercialization, where Cisco was the large organization that really brought VoIP into corporate America, but they did it with a